Okay, I think Jesse, let's allow you to do your thing. I
Oh, I'm not muted, so you're typing
not
away.
you're muted, no. We will. So I'll let Jesse introduce himself. We'll just crack on. I think we don't need any formal introductions, do we? Well, I'd see you have a title slide, so you can introduce yourself. That works for you, up in space.
Does. It's fine. Bear with me one moment while I figure out what I'm sharing. You're looking at code, right?
Yes, we are.
You're looking at the title slide. So what it's worth. So I don't know how much of an introduction to give you. I'm Jesse Liberty. I've been programming for about 30 years, programming in Xamarin for the last 5. You can reach me at the contact information you see. And we should probably start.
We can see your code, not your slide.
You do? Well, that's interesting because this is on the same screen.
It doesn't share screens, it shares windows. So
Well, that's mean of it. Shares windows. Sorry, I just want to get this reasonably right, or we'll do it without. Screen. Okay, click share screen. Well, now there then. Well, let's go with the code, and we'll skip the slides. Nobody likes slides anyway. Anyway, as I was saying, this is going to be very informal. It usually lasts about half an hour. The goal is to talk over what's new in C# 8. I was just watching a presentation on what's coming in C# 9. It's very hard to keep up. I was barely keeping up with C# 7. Their pace of change is very quick. Okay, the first, which I hope you can see my code, says nullable reference types. I had Mads Torgersen, who's the lead C# developer, on my podcast, which you can get at my website, jesseliberty.com. It's worth listening to him. He said that he thought that nullable reference types were the most important new feature in C# 8. And I think the reason for that is that they help avoid null reference errors. You still have to do a little work, but they make a big difference. Now, as of the last time I checked, this was turned off by default, and you had to turn it on, and you could do that at the project level or at the page level. So here I'm turning on nullable and saying enable. And what that does is it looks for potential nullable references. And if it finds them, it gives you a warning. Now, let me see if I can move. Yes, I can move the pictures out of the way. It's very good. And let's put the error list. Okay. Before we look at the warning that I did get, it's a fairly simple program. This is where the action happens. So the first thing we do is we get the subscribers. And that's as simple as creating a list and putting a bunch of people in the list and returning that list. Let's see. Okay, once we have the subscribers, we're going to get the names from the subscribers. And that takes that list of person objects and selects for the result of calling GetName. And GetName, in our initial version, simply returns the first name, middle name, and first initial of the middle name, and then the last name. So pretty simple program, and not obvious that there are any problems in it. So if I build, with that setting on, I get one warning, and that warning is that it cannot convert null literal to non-nullable reference type, which means that we have not told the compiler of our intent. So we can go to the line in question, and we have not said that middle name can be null. So we come down to the definition, to the property, and we make it a nullable string. Now we've told the compiler of our intent that middle name can be null. We're not done. When we build, we should get, yes. Now we get a warning, dereference of a possibly null reference. And that is here where we're dereferencing middle name, and we just told it that middle name might be null. So we need to comment this out and uncomment this. And now we're checking to see if middle name is not null and returning appropriately. So what has happened is that the compiler noted that you have not signaled an intent that middle name can be null. And then it noted that you're using that nullable string without testing for null. And when we build it now, it should be happy. Yep. And the error list has no warnings and no errors. And if we run that, wishing my luck here, let me just make this bigger. What am I doing here? Font. I'll make that 36. Is that going to work, or is that going to be? Yeah, that's close enough. So you can see that it finds all four. And for Miguel, or more.
So we can't see
obviously,
because it's in a different window.
How are we going to do this? I thought Zoom allowed for this. So I've been walking through all this code, and you haven't. Oh, you have seen it.
We've seen the code. We haven't seen it running.
How do I? Okay. Well, what you'll have to do is take my word for it, which is that. One moment. Sorry, you couldn't hear that, right?
We're very trusting. It's good.
Right. So Mads Torgerson has subscribed, comes up because it looks and checks that it's not null and displays just the first and last if it is. So the takeaway from this is that you're enlisting the compiler in finding potential null references. How will I know if there are questions? There was a chat at one point.
If you can't see the chat, I will shout out if there are questions, or people can unmute to ask questions.
Let's do it that way. Okay, so that's Nullable References. It's a pretty simple and straightforward to use, but can make a tremendous difference in not getting null reference exceptions, which are typically fairly hard to track down. Let me, you can't see my slides, so let me get that out of the way. And move on to a somewhat controversial feature, which is default interfaces. So let's close this solution. I think I have default interfaces here. Yes, I do. Okay, so the idea here is that we have a logger, and you can pass values to the logger. And if we look at the interface for that, it says it has a level and a message. So we're sending in level 2 and general logging. And we can derive from that console logger, which does whatever additional work you want. And that goes out to the world. And then you decide you want to add to this interface, which, but you don't want to break everything. So now what you can do is you can come down to Ilogger, and you can, let me just make sure I get this right for you. Yes, okay. You can create an overload of log here with an implementation for how that's going to work, so that if someone uses the original log, then it'll continue to work. But if they use the new log that takes an exception, one of two things will happen. If they don't, in their class, override this, they'll get the default interface with this working code. But if they do create their own, then they'll get their own. So let me try to make that a little bit clearer with this. Okay. So here's a test. We take a console logger and we set it up so that we can have an exception. You know, it's interesting, if you say 5/0, it won't let you do that at compile time. But you can fool it by just giving it two variables, which I thought was interesting. Now, when we get an exception, we want to call both loggers. And why is this complaining? Just bear with me one moment. What did I tell it I would do with an exception? So it wants exception.message, I think. Is it happy now? It's still not happy. Well, this is going to be the rough part of the presentation, obviously. Sorry, I should have had this set up for you better. Okay, here's Ilogger, and here's where I'm putting in the overload of log that takes an exception and takes that exception and passes it to log the existing one with a level of 1, and then the message from the exception, which comes into here, the parameter. And so if I come down here now, this is perfectly happy. So I didn't present that very well. So are there questions about what I did say? No questions? Is it just that people in the UK are very polite? Mic's on? Hello? I've got total silence on this end. I'm hoping that's supposed to be.
I think the explanation makes sense, Jesse. Thank you.
Okay. Can we talk about the across the pond cultural differences while I work on this?
We're busy taking it all in, digesting.
Okay. The next bit is ranges and indexes. So let me close this. And I don't think that's on here, so let me go to here. Can you just drag this into place? No, you cannot. Even if it's closed, I don't think you can. It'd be nice if you could, don't you think it would be nice if you could drag the solution? I wonder if you can, maybe you can. Let's see, does that work? Looks like it did. No, that's nullable reference types. Okay, it's worth a shot. Close solution, I thought we did that. Okay, and what I'm going to do is open up the ranges and index method. I think that actually did work. because they share a certain amount of code. Okay. Oh, unbelievable. I'm trying to get this into the same window so that you can see it. File, open project. Let's do it this way. Where are you? You're in Documents, GitHub. Yes, C#8. Yep, there we go. Index and ranges. And we want this one. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we have a program very similar to what we saw before, get subscribers, and then get the names. And here's get names, which you pass in a list of people. It iterates through the list and returns the result of calling get name with that person. So this is what we saw in the nullable reference part. So it should look familiar. I've got a few more names this time. Okay. And if I run this, I'm going to get exactly what I got last time. However, if I comment this out and I use this second line, what I'm saying is for each person in people, but now I'm giving it a range. And the range is non-exclusive for the first number. That's inclusive, so it'll start at 1, offset 1, which of course is the second person, but exclusive of the final number. So this is going to give us offsets 1, 2, and 3. And if you could see my screen, you would see that it would give us Kennedy, Roosevelt, and Miguel de Casa. On the other hand, if I comment that out, the caret means from the end, and it's saying 2. So I'm going to run that, even though you can't see what it says. That makes little sense. Give me 1 second. Oh, yeah, no, that did work. Okay. So what I got, which confused me no end, is I got, let's look at the names. I got Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, Roosevelt, and then Miguel and Mads. And what I did not get is the final 2. And that's because it's saying, because there's no number here, it's saying started off at 0, and then go 2 back from the end. So 1, 2, and you'll get Mads, but you won't get Georgie. So that is ranges and indexes, which can be convenient. It's not, I think, a killer feature.
You said it was controversial, Jesse. Is that because the 1.4 seems to suggest that you should be fields 1, 2, 3, and 4 rather than 1, 2, and 3?
No, the one that was controversial was the default interface body.
Oh, sorry.
That allows you to put implementation inside an interface. I don't think anybody's been real controversial about this one because I don't think anybody's paying all that much attention to this one.
Yeah, I found the 1.4 really confusing when I first came across it.
Yes, it is confusing, and on top of that, it's of limited value. I mean, there are cases where it's definitely going to be convenient, but it's not going to be a killer feature, I don't think.
Does that permit variables in place of the numbers, or is it hard fixed?
Now, that is a great question to which I do not know the answer, but we can try. Let's go here. Let's say, am I inside some kind of method? Well, I must be because I'm calling this for each. So we're going to say int x equals 1, y equals 4, and then we're going to say from x to y. I'm betting this will work just fine, but let's try it. Well,
Comment the line.
that's not good, but its value is never used. Oh, well, it would be nice if I uncommented this. And I got exactly what I got last time. So the answer to your question is yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Variables there. When in doubt, ask the compiler. Async streams. Okay, this I think is from the world of cool. So let me open that for you. Is that already there? No, that would be too helpful. Open project resolution, async streams. Okay. This allows for the situation where you're going to be getting values, but you don't know how many, and you don't know when they'll be available. So we have a new key name, iasync enumerable. Let me put the accent differently. Iasync enumerable, which is to say it's much like Inumerable, but it has this key async part in it. And that implies that the enumerable will be coming to you asynchronously. You can't know what's in that collection. You can't know when you're going to get it. And we're going to mimic that by using random. And we'll generate a random number between 0 and 1,000. And then we will delay the display by that many milliseconds. And then we will return that to be visible. And this one you really need to be able to see. So I'll see what I can do about that. Let's come up here to main. Main says, go ahead, get for each value in that machine that we created right here, and write it out as delayed by whatever that value was, milliseconds. And so unlike an enumerable where you would know exactly what's in the collection that you would enumerate over, here we can get any number of values and we can get them at any random time. And it's going to pull them out and give them back to the calling for each loop. Now, I'm going to run that, and then I'm going to see if I can change the screen so you can see the results. Let's see. New share. Well, that's interesting. And there you go. Okay, you should be able to see that now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's happening is that it is pulling out random values and then as they become available, displaying it and telling you how many milliseconds it took to display that one. And this can go on forever or for a limited time, depending on your needs. But the goal here is that you can imagine messages or other ways that you want to be able to get data that is not in a collection, but rather is going to be arriving asynchronously. So let me switch again, new share, go back to the code. Okay. So any questions about that? Because that one tends to either be totally obvious or throw you completely.
How did you get set the end condition, Jesse?
Well, I didn't here. I have a forever loop.
Yes, but you can set
But
an
you
end
could,
condition.
yes, you absolutely could. You could say, I'm waiting for 100. I don't know when they'll be available.
Okay. Can you set the end condition from the iasync enumerable?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
Can you set the actual endpoint within the async enumerable function? Can you tell it to abort effectively?
Oh, sure. You could build around this. You could build around that
So it just aborts when that exits, basically.
Right. I mean, I can do that very simply here by doing this.
I must admit, I've actually done this, and I know that, but we were talking about it in the team the other week, and someone just could not get this. It actually came out of it.
Okay, now it's going to give me 19. Actually, it's going to give me 20, and then it's going to stop. So here it's very simple. But if you're building a web application or you're building a phone application, then you're going to want some condition that arises, either the number that you want to get or more likely some event that's going to cause it to stop.
Makes sense.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. Okay, so the next thing is the big one, which is working with, pattern matching and switch expressions. So that one I do need to show slides for. Let me bring this up and then I will switch windows again. Okay. Display, go like that. I'm getting good at this. New share. Which one is what I want? This one. Okay, hopefully you're looking at code.
We are.
Great. All right, so this is based on a write-up by Mads that I will point you to at the end, who does a much better job of explaining this, but I think that this is worth breaking down and taking a look at it. So we're building a class toll calculator, and the first method in that class is calculate toll, which gets an object. That is to say, it could be any kind of vehicle. And notice that the switch comes at the end because this is a switch expression, not a switch statement. And you'll notice that there's no case statements and there are no breaks. Switch expressions are much terser and more elegant. So here we're saying if it's a car, charge the person $2, and if it's a taxi, charge them $3.50 and so forth. So okay, that's fine, but what if we want to charge by the passenger? So we can go ahead and put in this property just right here and say if it's 0, then take $2 and add 50 cents to it. And if you have 1 passenger, well, then that's the regular price. And 2 passengers, you get a discount. And everybody else, you get a bigger discount, but the same bigger discount. And we do the same thing with taxis. Now with buses, it's more interesting because we use this when keyword. And so what we're saying when is when the riders divided by the capacity is less than half, then charge a penalty. And when the riders less the capacity divided by the capacity is greater than 90%, that is when 90% full, get a discount. Otherwise, here's what a bus calls. We can go a step further than that. That was the switch we just did. And we can, where's what I want? Come on. There we go. We can do a switch within a switch, nested switches. So here we're switching on the vehicle type. And then within finding a car, we're switching on the number of passengers. And so we could just put 0, 1, 2. And this underbar now means everything else, which you can use in any switch expression. And then we come back here and we switch on the type and we'll do the same thing. And this is where you can go to see that walkthrough. Let me show you that if I can figure out how to get the screen sharing has stopped. Okay. Let me just show you quickly. I believe it's yes, it would be good if I checked rather than floundering around. So let me quickly pull that up. C# switch. Okay. Work? Yes, it does. Okay. And you still can't see that. So let me go back to the, oh, it's making me cry. there it is. Share screen, share that one. Share. And if I move this, you'll still see it, right? Okay, so this is Mad's walkthrough of the same thing we just looked at, but in more detail. And you need C#8 for it. And then he describes the scenario we were talking about with why and when you would use pattern matching and setting up the various aspects of the car and so forth. And he talks in here about matching designs, which is well worth reading because pattern matching has advanced a great deal in C#8. And I'm just going to run through this very quickly because you saw the main part of the code. He talks about the difference with a switch expression and the arms on a switch expression and how you write that. And he shows you a test program that you can use to test what we've done so far. And then he slowly and incrementally adds features to this. The part I wanted to show you, this is what we saw, but broken out fully, is if you want to add peak level pricing. So you're going to do that depending on whether you're on a weekday or a weekend and what time of day it is and the direction. And he makes this huge truth table for depending on the day and the time and the direction. And then he begins to break it down with pattern matching. So the first question is it a weekday? And you can see that for each one, he sets true or false. But if you observe, you can see that the weekdays are all true and the weekends are both false. So we can break that down using pattern matching to saying that the 2 weekend days are false and everything else, which is what this underbar indicates, is true, which is nice and terse. And we do the same thing for the time band, and I'll let you look at the article for that. But you get these huge tables that you can then break down to much simpler code. Now, this does not look like anything we've seen before, so it takes a little while to get the syntax and to get your idea of how pattern matching works. But you can see that this is saying the first thing it wants to know is week of day, and based on the time of toll, and get the time band, and is it inbound or outbound? And then in each tuple, it's matching accordingly and giving you the value. So that's far terser, cleaner, and arguably easier to understand once you're more comfortable with this. And then he shows how you can combine those and where to go from here. So I highly recommend this article. Let me put the slide back up with the way to get to it. Boy, Zoom doesn't make this terribly easy, does it? Let's see. Here's my, there we are. Let's see, new share, and there. So this is a shortcut to that article, which, as I say, does a great deal of detail on pattern matching. And I said it would take half an hour, and it took 40 minutes, so not bad.
That's great. There was one question we missed from the chat when you were looking at ranges.
Yes.
So can you do ... then a number, and will it implicitly start from 0, or do you have to put 0 then ...
No, you can do exactly that. You can do ... number. And we saw that on the one going from the end. But yes, if you want from your 3rd offset to your 5th offset, sorry, from your 0 offset to your 5th offset, you can do ... 5.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a potentially really complex question.
Then I'm going to go
one
run
of the
and
things
hide.
I'm looking at is some code with third-party extensibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if So what I need to be wary of is new features coming in, but old versions of extensions which don't know about those new features, and of course new features and extensions, but someone running the old version of the code. So we've got
Right.
both sides. I'm wondering if default interfaces might help with that in some way.
If what? I'm sorry?
If default interface members might help in some way.
Well, they will in terms of making it possible to extend any incoming interfaces. And the incoming code would simply not be using the C#8 features. So I don't see much danger there. And the company I'm working with, we've been doing that quite a bit. We have some legacy projects that were written in C#6, I think. And as we write new C#8 code, we've not run into a problem. And I do think you're right that default interfaces would solve the problem if you need to extend an existing interface.
Okay, brilliant. I need to go back and look into that some more. But that's potentially very, very useful. Thank you. Anyone else free to unmute themselves and have ask a question? Come on, ask questions, then you don't have to go back to work for a little bit longer.
Yeah, really. Are you all, can I ask, are you all quarantined at home? Is that across all of the UK?
It is across the whole of the UK, yeah.
Yeah, I've been in this house for 6 or 7 years.
I just went out for once a week essential shop and got stopped by the police on the way there and on the way back.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And how did you prove to them you were going for essential shopping?
They said they wanted to see me on the way back and make sure I had shopping.
Oh, that's great. That's brilliant. Now, we have quarantine in place, but I don't think it's being enforced by the police except in some small towns.
I think it's very sketchy in the UK how it's enforced, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, yeah, everybody's constitution is taking a bit of a hit. And we do have some idiot governors opening up their states already. Sorry, a little propaganda there, but mostly we're all inside and have been. As far as I can tell, I've been inside for about 6 years now. Or at least that's how it feels. Okay, anything else we can talk about or cover? Or there's material on C#9 coming out, and I'm about to do a podcast with one of the lead C#9 designers, which will cover a good bit of the roadmap. But if you want Mad's impressions on what we just saw, let me just lead you there since I'm making you crazy with all these switches anyway. Now, see, I've lost my how you change. There we are. It's on the other screen now, just to torture me. New share. Okay. All right. So here's my web. You're looking at the web now, right?
Yeah. I've just put the link to the podcast episode in the chat.
Oh, okay, great.
You can show us what the page looks like so everyone's certain they get the right thing. Because you have to you can't click on links from
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, the easiest thing to do is just go to my site and scroll down because it's pretty near the beginning. Where are we? Come on, Mads, where are you? Okay, here we are. So this in this episode, he talks quite a bit about the new features and how to use them and why they were included. And then there are links here to a blog post on what's new in C#8 and that example that we just looked at, the bridge toll, and then a whole blog post on nullable references and a link to the roadmap for C#9. So, and for me, I had a lot of fun with that podcast. He's great at being a guest. The ideal podcast is I talk for a minute and you talk for 10, and he's quite good at that.
I've got another question coming through in the chat, which is C# 8 enabled by default in the latest Visual Studio 2019?
That came up the other day, and I said yes, and then someone said no. So I believe that it is in the latest version, but if it's not, it's one line in your project file to turn it on. And
So that's the nullable reference types, but that's not necessarily C# 8, is it?
yeah, no, but there
And
is
then
one
different
line
features
to turn
vary by
C#
different project
8.
types as well.
Sorry, what?
Different features are available for depending on different project types. So not everything you've shown can be used in every type of project.
Well, in any C# project. I'm not sure what you're saying.
So no, there are some. Someone can help out, but there are some of the features of C# 8 are dependent on the underlying framework, because they need .NET Core things, don't they? And so you can't use everything here, for example, in a UWP project.
I'm willing to believe you, and I'll certainly check that, but we've been writing in C# 8, and we do support iOS, Android, and UWP. So let me look into that and send you a email about what I find.
Okay.
C# 8 in any .NET project, says James Montemagno. Let's see. You can use to turn it on, perhaps add a NuGet package for certain features. This is an older article from November.
Default interface members, indices, and ranges are only supported in .NET Core 3 projects.
Huh.
So if you're doing Xamarin, obviously you get that because you've got .NET Core 3. I'm guessing it will translate it for things which don't run .NET Core 3.
See, this is the problem. I spend my whole day in Xamarin, so I know nothing of anything else.
I knew there were some things, and default interface members makes the most sense to be one of them.
Okay. And if it's not by default, you can go into your project and change the language version to 8. But I thought I read that with the latest Visual Studio, it comes as the default language version. Also something we can check. The problem with looking this stuff up online is that things are changing so quickly.
Yeah.
Let's see.
There you go. A few limitations. That looks.
I think this is, you're right, in non.NET Core 3. So the answer to that is to upgrade to .NET Core 3 and C# 8. That's the answer. Okay, any other questions? Any other comments?
Jesse, your C# book has been the go-to book on my shelf for many years as I self-taught myself C#. But I'm kind of interested to know what your thoughts are on the evolution of C#. I mean, are they getting desperate to pile in new features, or are you seeing genuine, on the whole, valuable enhancements, or is this just spit and polish at this stage?
No, you would think so because it's a mature language. But I thought that some of the things in C# 8, the asynchronicity and the asynchronous Ienumerator and the nullable were both significant. And there's a few things coming in 9 that I think are significant. So I think the language is still evolving. You're seeing more, what's the word I want? Features that are F-sharp-like coming into the language as well. It's, a lot of it is perspective. If they're features that you need and they open up possibilities for you, then it's still evolving. Mm-hmm. If they're just sugar that you're never going to use, then it is a somewhat mature language. It started in 2000 with the early bits, And so that's 20 years ago.
Is there anything that irks you? You think, why have they not fixed that, or why haven't they brought this feature? Is there anything that you'd be pushing to see included that for some reason has not been included?
You know, there are people on the mailing list who are really good at that and have all these feature ideas and so on. And I tend to be more nose to the grindstone, you know. And the one feature I keep pushing for in Visual Studio is to have a switch that makes when you make a new class, it writes in public instead of defaulting to private. Because every time I make a class, I make it public. I don't think I've made a private class in years. And so that's a feature I would like. But most of my features are Visual Studio features. Another one that I suggested and I'm banging the table for is the ability to have a nameable setup so that I can open up the files I want, put breakpoints where I want, and then when I'm called off to do something else, I can just name that by the feature I'm working on, and then go do something else and come back to it. And they nod and say, interesting idea. And so far I haven't seen it.
There you go, Matt. A couple of ideas for your roster of Visual Studio enhancements. You prefix them with Jesse just to recognize the suggestion.
There you go. I think there's a community board where you can put suggestions, and then people can upvote them and downvote them. If you look in the far upper right corner of Visual Studio, there's what looks like two little people, tiny people, or a person with a thought bubble, I guess. And if you click on that, it takes you to their feedback form, which is where you can make language suggestions and suggestions about Visual Studio. And as I understand, they're pretty responsive to that. So, Matt, you will please, after I hang up or at some point, collect a little bit of feedback and let me know if this was generally useful. That would be great.
I certainly will. I'll invite everyone to obviously leave comment in the chat or on Meetup as you registered there, or contact me or Jesse directly and we'll pass that on.
That would be great. The other, I need to write down the name. This is a fixed user group, is that right?
Yeah.
And what's the name of that user group?
Well, traditionally we've been Windows Apps London.
Okay, Windows Apps London. Great, thanks. I'm supposed to keep track of user groups I speak with, and so I spoke with.
We have more questions coming in.
Oh, good.
If I maybe can ask one more question.
Yes, please.
If I look at the features, some of the features you look at, you introduced today, don't seem to be directly functional, but they seem to remind me a lot of Python or Haskell. Is there a, I mean, I'm not sure if you know that, but is there a drive to also implement lazy evaluation in C#, or is C#, are the developers for C# then looking at what happens in other programming languages that overtake them on the TIOBE index, or how does that work?
Well, I know that C# is becoming more declarative, and that it's that from what I've heard them saying, there's a movement towards immutability and working with immutable objects. But all of this is fairly vague in my head. I think the C# 9 roadmap would probably give you more information, and I should have the. We're recording the podcast about C# 9 on Monday, so certainly by the end of next week that'll be up.
Okay. Because immutability then also again sounds like a feature that seems to come straight from the functional programming languages.
Yes, that was the word I was looking for. Thank you. That there's definitely, in my mind, an increasing impact of functional programming languages.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. But remember, I don't speak for Microsoft.
No, I understand. The reason why this is of interest to me in particular is because right now I'm teaching functional programming to students, and they keep asking me why we do this, why we learn to write programs without global variables and so on. And I try to explain to them that there's an industry case to be made, but it would be interesting to point out here, look at plans for C#9 or what has been implemented in C#8, that there's actually a paradigm that's supported more and more. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much.
No, yeah, thank you. All right, thank you all. I appreciate it. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Jesse.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.